Mhm.
You're on, Dennis. Go ahead.
Yeah, good night, viewers, and welcome to this another program of Advancing the Cause. And I tender now an apology for my sister and my comrade and my friend, MP Miss Coretta, for her absence because of duties beyond her call. With me in studios tonight is the guests of this program, Dr. Vincent Adams, a former director of EPA. Dr. Adams, I wish to welcome you on this program.
Thank you, Dennis, and welcome to all of our wonderful guests and listeners, not only in Guyana but North America, Europe, and every place else. Look forward to having a good discourse with them.
Tonight we are discussing, viewers, the subject or topic, education in crisis, the dialogue between the Guyana Teachers Union and the Ministry of Education. But before we get started, I want to extend to the entire Muslim community best wishes on this their holy month of Ramadan as they enter into and start observing this holy month. So, as we proceed, as I said early on, we deal with education in crisis, the dialogue between the Guyana Teachers Union and the Ministry of Education. I am advised that based on the instructions of the court, Justice Sissoon named two senior counselors in the person of Senior Counsel Stobie and in the person of Senior Counsel Laku. And so they were there in the courts as requested by the Justice Kisoon, and they were advised to commence the mediation process. And so that process commenced on the 7th of March, where the Ministry of Education and the Guyana Teachers Union met for the first time. And in that meeting, a number of agreements were reached. But this is what happened when those arrangements or agreements were reached. The Chief Education Officer, Saddam Hussein, made a public statement. And this is what he said in that public statement. Misleading articles by Demerara Wave and News Source. And because it is short and because, Doc, I want your comment on it, I read very quickly what it says. The Ministry of Education has noted the article. Teachers Union, Ministry of Education, agreed to multi-year period of salary hikes and salary negotiations for teachers to cover 2019-2023 period by Demerara Waves Online News and News Source respectively. These articles convey the false impression that the government of Guyana has agreed there shall be a multi-year agreement 2019-2023. This is a proposal by the union that will be discussed. The government maintains its original position that any multi-year agreement must start from the year 2024, not retroactively. And so this is what the Chief Education Officer, Saddam Hussein, would have run out after the meeting, taking the first jump and making a statement. But let me say to the viewing public that at that meeting, the chief education officer, Saddam Hussein, indicated that he was the chief negotiator representing the Ministry of Education and by extension the government of Guyana. And so when the Guyana Teachers Union put forward their proposal to him, he immediately left the room, went out for 2 hours and 5 minutes, and came back and agreed with the GTU as it relates to salary issues from 2019 to 2023. He agreed with that because after he made that mischievous statement, the Guyana Teachers Union made a release of the minutes of that meeting, and every single thing that he denied the chief education officer as normal, everything he denied, the Guyana Teachers Union put out there the minutes of the meeting. So, Doc, that would have given us a little background as to what happened in the courts, what was the proposal by the judge, the justice, what the first meeting was all about, and where we are. And so at this stage, I ask your comments on what I would have just said.
Thanks, Dennis. Um, and it's even bigger than this. I think what that whole, everything that you said there, what it shows again, and it's more proof that this government, first of all, you cannot trust this government, and secondly, they have no respect for the rule of law, even when the judges rule. Um, I have been firsthand involved in the ruling by the same Judge Kisoon on the parent company guarantee to cover an oil spill if it occurs, that Exxon will be responsible for that oil spill. I was there at EPA when we wrote it into the law, into the permit. And when I left, the government, two courageous citizens had to go to court to defend something that was already in the law. And of course, Judge Kisoon again ruled in favor, overwhelmingly in favor of of what was in the law that we had already put in. And the government turned around and now they've appealed it. So this here is modus operandi for this government. And the other thing that I understand, Dennis, is that even in the very first meeting, when the GTU walked into the room and they saw that, for example, the permanent secretary wasn't there, they asked the question as to who's representing the government, and it was specifically told to them that the CEO will represent the government, and whatever he says will be the representation of the government position. And of course, we know that they came out and they denied what was there until the minutes show exactly what the GTU was saying. So it shows that there is no trust whatsoever. Nobody can trust this government because, and this here is not the only instance. We can go on for the rest of the night, bringing up all types of examples. They lie through their teeth to begin with, and when they get caught, they get caught in a corner, and instead of you're walking back, they don't walk back anything. They would just decide to dig in even more. And let me say something about this whole thing about education and crisis. We can go back to the budget. The budget is what are the priorities. The budget tells where the heart and soul of a government lies. And we can see that it doesn't lie where in the interest of the ordinary man. It lies in the interest of their rich friends and families. I want the Guyanese people to listen to this. 58%, meaning $58 out of every $100 goes into infrastructure. And who are the people who gets the infrastructure money? Maybe 100 or maybe a couple contractors. Where do those contractors belong? It's the friends and families. I mean, there's no question about that.
That is correct.
Education, not infrastructure, is what is the foundation of the building of an economy. And that's not coming from me. That's coming from Harvard. That's coming from MIT Sloan Business School. That's coming from the United States government where I work. When we structured our budget, the basis had to be education. So it's not infrastructure. That used to be the old paradigm. It's about education. And Exxon and the big companies know that. If you ask them, what is the most important thing that attracts them to investing in a country? They're going to tell you it's education, education, education. So let's put this into perspective in terms of the priority when you look at the budget. Like I said, 58% of the money goes into infrastructure. You know how much that goes into paying teacher salary? 2.5%. 2.5%. So what you're saying is that the teachers are worth 2% of the value of the country, while the infrastructure is worth 58%. That's what it is. And teachers are working for minimum wage or less than minimum wage. A teacher, the average salary of a teacher, and I run some numbers, and I want Guyanese to listen to this carefully because they could relate to these numbers. A teacher, a job as important as that, the average salary of a teacher, it's $180,000 per month. That's about $180,000. It's about, maybe 850 US dollars. Do you know what the other countries, Trinidad and Tobago, their average salary is $1,500. Grenada, that does not produce a drop of oil, it's $1,900. Dominica, that does not produce any oil, $1,670. Even little Antigua, it's $1,110. And our teachers here, all they're making on the average, by the way, because there are some teachers who are making like $91,000,
Yeah.
which is $450 US dollars. I don't know how anyone could expect them to survive. And then the president has the nerve to tell people that they don't have a conscience. Who doesn't have a conscience when ministers are making close to 2 million? They don't buy anything. They've got chauffeur. They're sending their kids. They're sending their kids to private school, and then they're telling people that they do not have a conscience. So that's what we're dealing with. That is exactly what we do. If, based on those numbers, the same 50% that this vice president shouting from the rooftop when he was in parliament in opposition, they must have 50%. He and the president themselves. I mean, there's video. They, of course, even when it's on video, they try to deny it. They must have 50%. Even 50%. Well, let's say we go with 50%, not this paltry 6.5%. 50% would take them to, let's say, an average of $290,000. And that 50% raise, that all they've got to do is take 2%. 2% out of that infrastructure, 58%. All they need is 2% out of it to pay for a 50% raise for the teacher. And the infrastructure will still get 56% of the entire nation's budget. And so that's the unreasonableness that we're dealing with here. And then coming and, talk. I mean, these teachers are too important. And, I hope that the nation has seen that we cannot trust the government. And, the GTU, they need to go to court because that's their only resort that they've got to go to. Even then, the government just don't even like to comply with the rule of law. The other thing that I beg and I hope and plea, the parents now have to support the strike. The G the 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 public service union has to support the strike, even if it bringing out the nurses, um, and some other sections of the public service union. They have to support the strike. That is the only thing that this government understands. And if they come into the strike, this strike will be over tomorrow. I'll be willing to guarantee you it. Bet you that would happen if they call out the nurses and some of the other public servants. This strike will be over in a jiffy.
Yes, Doc. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for giving that overview. Because definitely, when you look at the salary scale of what our teachers are getting as it relates to what our Caribbean sisters, what they are paying their teachers without the kind of resources that they don't have and we have, then it is a shame and a curse on this government to be able to pay that salary, meager salary, very insignificant as it is, to all our teachers in this country. And
And here,
so we come back
sorry, go ahead,
to
go ahead, Dennis.
yeah, we come back to the minutes of the meeting as clearly set out in the minutes by the Guyana Teachers Union. And every single thing that would have been said in this 5-page document as produced by the Guyana Teachers Union would have given a clear indication that there is that level of dishonesty on the part of not only the chief education officer, the PS, and the Minister of Education. Why is it he said firstly that he was the chief negotiator and that he was representing the Ministry of Education and by extension the government of Guyana. And when the proposal was made to him that the teachers are there, the union is there in an effort to be able to discuss salaries and other financial issues, more particularly salary for the period 2019 to 2023. He agreed with them then, but suddenly he left the room, went away for 2 hours, 5 minutes, came back, and still had the agreement with him. And when that meeting would have been concluded, and those statements would have been made based on what would have been agreed upon by the Demerara Waves and the online news and the news source, respectively, he jumped out and he said in a press statement that it was totally wrong. Who are we dealing with in this education system? What is it we expect and hope to expect out of these talks when we have people who are very dishonest and not trustworthy and have no respect in any way or in any form for the Guyana Teachers Union? Our teachers were out there for so many weeks, and they were there, and no person indicated to them that yes, there is need for us to dialogue. It was only when the matter was taken to court for our teachers, when the Ministry of Education made that release to say that they are going to be deducting salaries from our teachers who went on strike, and that they are going to withhold the contribution of GTU, contribution rather, that would have been deducted by the Ministry of Education and not handed over, not deducted for the union and handed over to the union. That would have been further disrespect to the union. And therefore, since the matter went to court, and I'm not going to say much on that because the next hearing is on the 20th of March. And so since I would have said that and I've spoken to that issue, then Doc, it would be good enough for you to come in at this point and be able to speak on that issue.
Yes. Um, you know, a lot of a lot of my friends, and I hear the commentary all over, that, well, the teachers should have seen this coming and should not have left the strike line. And I don't necessarily agree with that. The one thing that it shows that one party, the GTU, is acting in good faith. They're saying, hey, you know what? Okay, they call us to the table, or we come to the agreement. Let's at least suspend the strike and let's go to the table. So at least the GTU is the trusted party, but obviously the government is not. They had no intention in the first place, whereas the GTU came with good intent and in good faith, and that's where we are. You cannot, like I said, the entire Guyanese population ought to see. I don't think there's any more evidence that is needed to see that this is a government that you just cannot trust, even when it's put in writing. They're denying that it was in writing until it shows up in the newspapers, and that's been a common practice. This is not the first time, but that's their modus operandi. I'm glad that the GTU decided to go to the table to expose them for the dishonesty and their untrustworthiness. Like I said, it seems as if the only avenue right now, that the only option that the GTU has, is to take it to the court, because and let the court force them. But you recall, even when the court makes a ruling, these guys want to stick their fingers in the eyes of the court. You remember when the CEO, I mean, I would have sent him to jail for deciding to disrespect the court ruling like that. But that's how they operate. They have no care for anybody else except for their friends and family, because remember, this is not affecting them now. All of their kids are going to private schools, and they're making
Exactly.
big, they're getting big fat salaries. They're getting their nice big vehicles. They've got chauffeur. They've got everything that they want. And they have no interest in the teachers. So the GTU has got to take them to court. And the thing that galls me is when they barefacedly say, well, we can't afford it because it's unsustainable. This is what the vice president says. It's unsustainable. Because I don't know what the oil prices will be in a few years from now. Well, you're putting all of the money, 58%, in infrastructure. You're not worried about if oil prices drop or not. So here again is the hypocrisy and the dishonesty. And what would I do with the nurses, to bring in that red herring, to kind of, cause friction between the nurses and the teachers, etc. And then they brag. The vice president now has a new song and dance. At every one of his speeches and press conference, he says, well, the teachers got a raise of 162% since 2019. But what he's not mentioning is that infrastructure, the increase in infrastructure during the same period of time, it's over 500%. It's over 500%. What he doesn't say is that during the coalition, when there was no oil, teachers got an average increase of 9%. They want to give 6.5%. So it doesn't jive. and they just cannot get their story straight. And they'd better listen to, even when President Lula from Brazil
Brazil.
was here. He saw what was going on, and the one thing he said, there has to be a balance. He said when he was driving from the airport to Georgetown, he saw all kinds of big, nice buildings and everything else, and he said, "I hope that the rest of the economy is feeling is feeling the same wealth that I'm seeing here." Um, he knew that that was not the case, but I think he just threw it out there to let them know that they're not doing that. I hope that the rest of the economy is feeling the same kind of a wealth and development of the ordinary man, to develop quality of life, etc. And that is not happening. You start again with education. So we're in a dilemma here, and without education, whether they know it or not, and it might be just through ignorance, without education, the entire country is doomed. It's doomed to fail. It is doomed to fail. So maybe we need to teach our the folks who govern this country that that is the case, not only here, but again in countries such as the United States. That's what they follow when they develop their budget, to make sure that they've got capacity and they've got that education that can sustain the entire economy. So that's what we're dealing with here.
Let me come to this point, Doc. I recall when you were the director of EPA, and I was then the regional education officer. I was at Region 3, then I came to 2. And
Yeah.
we always had a discussion in which you said to me, and by extension, you said that to so many other persons, that programs ought to be fashioned at the school level
Yep.
and at the technical institute in an effort to be able to take care of the workforce that is going to be required for the oil and gas industry.
Yes.
And you would have started that process.
Yes.
And when you were no more there as we were, no more there, everything came to a halt and those
Yes.
proposals were thrown through the window. So
Yep.
when they talk about us having to import workers and specialists, it is not because we do not have. It would have been because they did not hear and follow up your proposal. Because
Yeah.
by now, from then, we would have been able to train a particular cohort to be able to go into specialized area in the oil and gas industry. But
Yep.
look at this. You made mention of what they are spending in infrastructure as against what they are spending in education, and the stifling of the University of Guyana, bringing in the gold scholarship and
Yep.
giving to the gold scholarship that is not seen, so to speak, an abstract, and you give to that program sums of money that are far more advanced than what you give to the lone University of Guyana. And not that alone. Many of the universities, if not all, first of all, they don't understand clearly what accreditation is all about. And so, very many of those courses and programs that they are offering in the gold scholarship, if not all again, are not accredited. And those institutions, I want to strongly believe, are not accredited. But because they have an opportunity to spend our money anyway, anyhow, they do that without taking into consideration that there exist teachers in the education system that are supposed to be able to provide you all of us with the required people, persons that are there to be able to take this country to another level. They have no interest in that, and therefore they are spending their money in a way that is not to the best interests of us in this country. And so, if we could go a little bit on what I would have retracted there, um, Dr. Adams, and let me add one to it. The Guyana Teachers Union, because they were not um, fully satisfied with the salaries. When we were in government in 2018, you recall that they went on strike. And when they went on strike, they were called off of the streets. And they went and they had negotiations with the Ministry of Education. And this time that went in good faith, and they were able to get an increase in salary without having difficulties and running to the court to be able to address those issues. So there are two issues that I am putting before you so that you can be able to speak to and be able to give us figures that might be able to allow us to understand where monies can come from in an effort to give to our teachers.
Yes. You know, to get to the education part, when even before I arrived in Guyana, when the former vice chancellor, Dr. Griffith, became the vice chancellor, he asked me to come on board and lead the way into transforming the engineering department at UG to prepare for the oil industry. So I came in and we we set up a petroleum engineering department, believe it or not. Of course, there was no labs, there was no fundamental teaching, aids and stuff like that. So what we did, we combined with the University of Trinidad and Tobago and the University of West Indies that had mature programs, because of course Trinidad has been around for over 100 years in the oil and gas industry. So we held
Yes.
several meetings with them. We developed an oil and gas program where you could have started from high school and go all the way through to your PhD in petroleum engineering, through UG, a combined program with UG, University of Trinidad and Tobago, and UWI. The program was already designed. We had the classes designed. We had the description of every class, for which semesters it was going to be offered. And of course, when the government changed, well, here comes COVID, the government changed, that was scrapped. In addition to that, myself and Dr. Griffith held a meeting in Georgetown with the heads of all of the government institutes throughout the entire country. What we were going to form was a consortium of where the institutes were going to be trained in oil and gas. We're going to set up a special program in oil and gas and work with oil and gas companies to recruit them and give them on-the-job training. At the EPA itself, I went and got $1 million from the World Bank, and we set up with that $1 million. They brought in an export from Mexico and helped us set up an oil and gas unit at the EPA, a 36-member unit that was going to be monitoring, and it was going to be a high-powered unit with, you had to have like 5 to 10 years experience in oil and gas with the requisite degrees such as petroleum engineering, geological engineering, etc. We set up that 36-member unit, put it in place, and we were going to go about to recruit for that unit. And when I left, they threw it away. I even, outside of the oil and gas unit, I encouraged my staff. I said, as long as you're going to be doing anything related to the EPA, go ahead, apply to universities, and when you get admitted, we will sponsor you, and all you've got to do is come back and spend 5 years. That was the deal. You know what they said when I left, and that all the staff some of the staff had already applied and they've gotten acceptance. So when they approached the new administration and told them, well, Dr. Adams told us to do this, and now we've got acceptance, If this program still on, you know what the foolishness that they told these staffers who were gonna go get the training to come back and build capacity. They said, "Oh, don't worry, Dr. Adams. All he wanted to do was it sounds as if he wanted to turn the EPA into university." That's what I said, that I wanted to turn the EPA into university. I mean, that's the shallow mindedness and the short sightedness thinking of these people. When we're trying to build capacity, that is why we're in the shape that we're in. And they're doing the same thing to education. They really do not care about poor people's kids, like I said. Their salaries are close to $2 million a month. They're sending their kids to private school. They're probably paying for private tuition. So they don't care a damn thing about the people in Guyana who are making probably 10% of what they're making. They really don't care. So that is the situation that we're in, Dennis. And the people ought to see it for what it is and understand how serious it is, because this here is now touching their kids and their families and their kids and their families' future. So I hope that they understand this, how serious it is, because again, I cannot overemphasize, everything starts with education. Everything starts with education. And so I hope that the parents, more than anybody else, will start coming on board and supporting these teachers, because this year we are at a crossroads. We are at a crossroads. And on top of that, when, let's say, we're a budding economy right now, and like I said, we're not going to get investors unless we have a sound education system. So investors are going to look at us, and they're not going to want to come and invest in this country after oil. And oil is only going to be here probably about 20, 25 years. So what's going to happen after 25 years? Half of our population are below the age of 26. So what's going to happen to that population in 25, 30 years when oil is done, when nobody wants to come in and invest outside of oil? Because the oil companies, right now, what they're going to do, they're bringing in their own people. We're not providing them. They could afford to bring in their own people. But when they're gone, we've got to have some other industry to bring in other investments. And they're not going to come in unless we've got a sound education base. And we will not be attracting teachers. That's the other thing. If I'm sitting back there and I'm an 18-year-old and trying to decide on a profession, even if before this year, even if I was planning to get into teaching, how many kids today you think would be thinking that they want to get into teaching when they see what is happening with teachers making this kind of wage and being treated this way? So that's we are in a crisis. We are in a crisis, and it's because of the short-sightedness and selfishness of the people who are leading this country, who are governing this country.
Let me before we go on, Doc, we are going to go to the um, second meeting that took place yesterday. And let me read two things that would, one, conclude this part of the discourse, and then two things that would follow as we go into the meeting that took place yesterday. Here are the two things for our viewers. And I'm quoting now, or I'm reading, because in the good books you say I'm reading from. So I'm reading from Proverbs chapter 3, verse 27. And hear it what it says. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, whom it is in your power to do so. That is something from the
Yeah.
Bible. And the second thing I want to read is from Proverbs chapter 12 and verse 22. And hear this one, that lion lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. And here is where you can make the contrast. The first one would be accredited to the government of Guyana and the Ministry of Education. And the second part of the scripture would be accredited to the Guyana Teachers Union. And so let me read the first part that is going to go directly to the government of Guyana and the Ministry of Education, the minister and all our officers. It says, I hope they are listening because this is for them. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. So that is for them, the government and the Ministry of Education. And this is to the Guyana Teachers Union. But those who act faithfully, as the Guyana Teachers Union is doing now, are his delight. And those are not my thoughts. I am just reading from what Proverbs chapter 22 said and what Proverbs chapter 23 verse 7 would have said. So I'm not making up those things by myself. And so I want them to very well understand that while we are discussing education in crisis, there are parts, verses, and chapters and books in the Bible that so support our teachers in what they do. And so yesterday, Doc, there was this second meeting between the Guyana Teachers Union and the Ministry of Education. And so when the Guyana Teachers Union team would have been there, the PS, before they were settled, I understand, that is the team from the Guyana Teachers Union, she began the meeting and she indicated to them that she is now the chief negotiator representing the Ministry of Education and the government of Guyana by extension. And in the first meeting, both the Guyana Teachers Union and the Ministry of Education, the minutes are clear and they are here to say that who are the persons that would comprise both teams. But lo and behold, there was this change. There was this change. And as a result of the change, this is what the PS said to them, that there is nowhere that they can accept any negotiations for salaries between 2019 and 2023 because it would be difficult, not in those words, but to the effect, for them to be able to get any monies to be paid to our teachers, any increase in salary. I say to the viewing public, as you are listening here tonight, let me first of all establish that the permanent secretary was out of order. She was disrespectful to all the members of the Guyana Teachers Union who were there to make representation. And they were not there on their own accord. They were there because the courts would have allowed them to be there to now commence phase one, the bilateral arrangement where negotiations are concerned. But let me advise the PS that anytime there's a new appointment, it is the duty of the Ministry of Finance to be able to find those sums of money. And she cannot decide that monies are not available or that the budget would have been read. She has to first of all show respect to the employees, and that negotiation between the ministry and the Guyana Teachers Union would so direct and inform what the budget ought to be as it relates to salaries. And you know, when you are preparing a budget, the budget has provision. There's a section in that budget as you prepare it to allow you to be able to cater for provisions for years that you would have had any backlog of payments in any way or in any form. And so, from the very beginning, that total disrespect would have been there for our teachers, for the Guyana Teachers Union. And so, as you said early on, if our teachers in training college would have looked at that, if our secondary school children would have looked at that, then it gives them that great opportunity to draw the conclusion that teaching is not something that they should go to, not as a result of what it is all about, but because of the disrespect that is being shown by the Ministry of Education, the employer of the teachers of this country. And so that now that I would have said that, I now ask of you, Doc, to be able to put in your 2 cents, so to speak, on this matter.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. Well, of course, that's a bunch of baloney in terms of finding the money. And sometimes, I really don't like to pass judgment on folks as to what their true beliefs are, what their religion is, whether they believe in if they have any religious beliefs or anything else. But you preaching those scriptures to them, I don't think it means anything to them. Because it's just like if they just lie without a cause sometimes, and a lot of times they can't even get their story straight. But in terms of finding the money, it's absolute baloney. Like I said, even if it's 50%, and it would be a disgrace, and an insult to give these teachers anything less than a one-time 50% increase. And by the way, that's going along with what the vice president and the president ranted and raved about when they were in opposition. Um, so so we're not making this up. So let's take the 50% raise, like I said before. Do you know if you take 13,500 teachers, and I think that's about a good size, 13,500 teachers, and you gave those teachers, let's say a 50% raise, that would add up. The total budget about $14 billion. $14 billion. Let me repeat it again. 14 billion. Do you know what the infrastructure budget is? 666 billion. 666 billion. 14 billion is what, about 2%, or so here you are. Let me, like, I could run. Here you are. So it's not a big deal to when they say they can't find the money. Take 2%. Take 2% out of the infrastructure budget. 2%, which is about $14 billion, like I said, and that would still leave the infrastructure with 652 billion. What more do you want? Which is still 56% of the total budget, which should not have even been the case. So when they say they can't find this money, it's absolute nonsense. Like I said, the teachers' salaries are only accounting for about 2% of the national budget. So when they, and every time I hear this nonsense about, well, we can't afford it. First of all, here's another case where they lie through their teeth and they're not even coordinating their lies. The vice president gets up there and says, well, we can't afford it because we don't know what oil is going to be in the next several years. Guess what the president says? The president said, okay, y'all hold on till 27. You can get what you want in 2027. Now, mind you, again, the vice president said, we can't give you this money because I don't know if we can sustain it when we get into the outer years, like 2027, our prices may drop. But at the same time, the president is promising you that, oh, everything is going to be fine in 2027. So here again, they're giving you what we call a lick and a promise. You know, he is conning you by telling you wait until 2027. And because the president is saying, you know, we're going to happen in 2027. And that's the merry-go-round you get with these people, totally dishonest. But the money is there. That's the last excuse that they should be coming to. The very last excuse, because the money is there. And for the value that you're getting out of that 2%, it's much more than the 58% that you're getting from infrastructure. So that's the dilemma that we have to deal with, and all you get are threats from them. Look at the Babu Jan speeches by both of them, especially the vice president, basically threatening people, saying we're gonna deal with those who oppose us. That's what he's saying, which to me is also pointed at the teachers and the strike. That's what the man said. The man said, "We will deal, we will deal with those basically who oppose us." Um, so that's what we have to deal with in terms of our leadership in this country, Dennis.
Thank you, Doug. So we are still at this meeting, and so they run out again. Fake Guyana Teachers Union and Abundance collective bargaining process with Ministry of Education, and they provided here a one pager. And as I said early on, the PS said that this budget, the 2024 budget, does not have the fiscal space to accommodate the retroactive payments of salaries for teachers during the period 2019 to 2024, 23 rather. This is what the PS said. I am indicating to our viewers and our teachers that what the PS would have said is trying to close this matter. And here are the disparities. She is closing the matter from 2019 to 2023. And the president is saying, wait until 2027. So somebody is going to come and say that we have to wait until 2027. Then the vice president says that they do not have and know if they have the capacity to be able to sustain and maintain this level of payment.
Right, exactly.
And so you are using the right term, or you use the right term early on. That is this whole process of merry-go-round in the government. Each one not speaking with each one the way they ought to in an effort to benefit our teachers. There's a different belief by the president. There's a different belief by the vice president. There's a different belief by the attorney general. There's a different belief by the minister of education and her own team of persons who do not understand anything, including the minister, the PS, the CEO, all of them, they're not clearly understanding anything about what is it about the unions and the agreements and settling of disputes. And they have not even read anything about the Trade Union Recognition Act. I don't think they have a sense or clear understanding about that. And there's a simple book or two books that they might have never read. And those books would have been Trade Unionism in Guyana by Ashton Chase and Labor at a Crossroad by Salahuddin, who used to be a minister of finance under the PNC government, and also used to be an active member of the Guyana Teachers Union. And so, if they arm themselves with certain documents before they go into that bargaining to be able to see what is there, then they are going to be in a better position. But that is the duty of the teachers to teach them what to do, as we are doing here now. Both of us are allowing them to be able to learn, to know, to understand, and be able to be wise. But gone are the days they can be wise, they are beyond learning, and they cannot absorb anything about knowledge. And so I make that now to ask of you, what are your views on that point?
Oh, I I don't know if these guys want to learn, and I'm not sure if they've got three different views either. I think that they know exactly what they're doing with the sole objective to enrich themselves and their friends and families and favorites. I cannot believe that they do not understand exactly what they're doing. They don't care. Here's where, if they're really genuine, let them move their kids out of private school and send them to public school. And that's the reason it comes down to that. It's not affecting them. Their heart and soul is not where, and a leader's heart and soul should be um in to look after the best interests of the masses of any country, the majority of the people. This is the complete opposite. Their main interest is looking after their people. The rich, that less than 1% of the elites in Guyana, which is the contractors, the people who are getting the money. Like I said before, and they should not go unnoticed by the Guyanese people. $666 billion, or 58%, meaning more than half of our budget, is going into one sector. And that one sector, only the people in that one sector, only the people making the hog of the money are the contractors. And guess who the contractors? All of the we see who get the projects. We one of the more famous ones was the guy that got the guy that got the $850 million contract and never torn a screwdriver yet in his life. Probably never have a. I think he says he doesn't even have a high school education or something. But that's what. So it's not. I don't think, Dennis, that they're completely ignorant or doesn't have an education in this here. They know exactly what they're doing. But Jagdev himself believes that he's a guru in every single subject. He talks about everything, but that's not their interest. Their interest is taking care of those few, and not the most of the population. That is why we're in a crisis here, and it's the same thing with the education. What the one thing that I would agree with you in terms of some of the things that I said here tonight. I think they're completely ignorant in understanding the value of education to an economy. They believe that building these nice big buildings and roads and everything. I remember this opposition itself, when they were in opposition, Dennis, you yourself may recall. You remember the famous words when, I think, it Barrett himself or whoever said it, that the people cannot eat road. They cannot eat road. Well, no, I guess they're making roads out of some material that is edible, because that's where their focus is to be building roads. Um, so that's where we are. It's all about where the priorities are, and the priorities is a reflection of where your heart and soul is. It's meaning the people who govern the country, and it's definitely not where most of the people of Guyana are. We have, Dennis, believe it or not, in the richest country on the planet, the fastest growing country on the planet. We've been producing oil for what now? Going on 5 years. We have about 45% of Guyanese live on $5.50 per day. That's a fact. And inflation is sky high. You can't, the ordinary man cannot go rent housing in Georgetown because of the inflation. A slice of pumpkin at the market is what, $1,000 or $1,200. A pound of tomatoes is the same thing. 5 little boro is $700. So how could you can't afford, you cannot live on housing and food and clothing on $5.50 a day. 45% of the people in Ghana, that's what they get. And we're the richest economy. But if you drive from the airport, for example, to Georgetown and drive around certain parts of Georgetown, you would swear, yes, we are the richest because of all of the infrastructure and everything that is going up. That is not Guyana. That's not what we. So and the teachers fall in that category of the poor people in Guyana. The teachers are among those, so they really don't care about poor people. They go and tear down their dwellings in certain areas. They go and rip
Yes.
it apart to put in roads and infrastructure that their friends can come in and make money. All over, all over the country. That's what they do. So like a jetty, you saw what they did at jetty across the river. You saw what they did at Moko. Go
Proper.
rip down people who are even trying to make a day-to-day living, even with their livestock, bury their livestock, take it away. That's the kind of callousness and uncaringness and heartlessness that this government is engaged. In the meantime, now all of the money goes towards filling their contractor friends' pockets. That's the economy that we have. That's what it is. So that's their motive.
So we come back. And yes, that was famous to them that when we were building roads, they said to the people, every community they went to, despite the fact we didn't have oil money, we were still building roads and we were building quality roads. And as a result of that, they were right. People cannot reach roads because our roads were of quality. But now people can eat the road because, as you said, the materials they are building the road with. In 2 days, 3 days, those materials form themselves into biscuits. And so they are building biscuit roads out.
Yep.
And so that is their level of mentality as it relates to what we were doing as against what they are doing, spending taxpayers' dollars willy-nilly and to allow their friends, families, and cronies to benefit to the extent that our teachers cannot receive what they ought to receive at this time. And so let me put this to you, Doc. It is normally said that growth in the economy plus growth yes, sorry about that. Growth in the economy will allow for you to determine what salaries persons are getting. And so that has to match with growth in the economy plus inflation would determine your salary. Speak to that as it relates to what we are receiving from our oil money, what the inflation rate is, and how is it our teachers can be able to benefit from that.
They come up with all of these economic shenanigans. I mean, there are all kinds of theories. Okay, there are all kinds of theories, and I'm one of those who do not believe in a GDP measure of an economy because it's skewed. If you've got a GDP is the value of goods provided, you've got an oil industry, right? That's where, in terms of value of goods and services, that's what's dominating right now. But guess where most of that money is going? Guyana is only getting 14.5% of that. So they're measuring all of this produced here, but 85% is leaving the country. But that's coming in as part of our GDP, that in the production part, because the measure of goods and services created or provided. So I am never a believer in that GDP stuff. Okay, I look at real data in terms of
Real
when you look
growth.
at quality of life. And the quality of life in Guyana is exactly what I've been enumerating there. 45% of the people still live on $5.50 per day. You cannot deny that. And then a slice of pumpkin, regardless of what you want to talk about in French, a slice of pumpkin is $1,000. A pound of tomato is about $1,200. Five little more, I think, is like $600. Those are the reality that people got to live on. Okay, so all this fancy thing about the growth of an economy
The
plus
growth of the economy plus
it's a bunch of it's economic gymnastics to make excuse for whatever they want to do. And the GDP, like I said, Guyana is a typical case where GDP doesn't make any sense. If everything that you produce, basically, you're putting a value of it here, but 85% of it is out of the country, basically, or at least, not exactly 85, because some of that 85% is being spent here also, but most of it it goes out to the country. So it's not a good reflection. We got to look at the real facts, as if you walk around and do a survey as to what is the quality of life. Is the quality of life of the people improving? You ask a teacher, you ask a teacher if the salaries that they're making, if it's making a difference in their life. Are they better off today than they were 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 15 years ago? That's how you measure. Are you better off today than you were 5 or 10 years ago? That's how you measure. That's how you see what's really. That's the reality. Not coming up with some economist sitting in an air conditioned office and have a nice big SUV with a chauffeur and all kinds of niceties of life. Where he doesn't have to worry anything, coming up with these stupid numbers to make an excuse. It's what the real man. Let me tell you, Shelly Jagan has to be turning in his grave when he sees the treatment of workers, because he was that kind of a person, who looked out for the working class. That's how he built his entire career and his life. That's what he fought for. And to see where this party is today is to just enrich their friends. Um, he's turning in his grave, and then they want to invoke his name. I look at them at Babu Jan and invoking this man's name. I mean, it's that in itself is sacrilegious.
let us take that one step further, as it relates to the prices of items in the market. And we are relating those prices to those items on the coastland. Let us go further into the interior, where our teachers are receiving the same salary as those on the coast, and they have to be able to have their 3 square meals a day. And so, if they go to the market in those interior and deep riverine areas, then it becomes more impossible on their part to be able to have that level of survival. And so it is that our teachers are suffering tremendously in those far flung areas of this country. And while you were head of the EPA, you visited those communities and you saw what we were doing in an effort to uplift the life and standards of those teachers. And if the same question would have been asked then, is your standard of living and life that you experience now there in after 2015 to the period 2019, 20 thereabout, as against before 2015, what you think our teachers would tell you, more
Without
particularly in the deep riverine area and in the hinterland.
without question, the answer would be a resounding yes. They during that 5 years, between 2015 and 2020. Well, of course, we had the COVID, so
Yes,
that really put a cause a problem. But without question, you remember Granger's program, the bus, boats, bicycles. We call it was it the 4 Bs or five, whatever it
breakfast,
is. For those hinterland kids, they had boats to go to school. Even they had buses. This government came in, they abandoned all that. I saw pictures where the buses. Imagine, I mean, how shameful could it get that they allow those buses to rot away because they don't want to use anything from the past administration? And this year was without oil because remember, under this administration, this oil only started producing in 2019. Okay, that was when oil started producing, and then the government did not even have no time in office during oil because 2020 was the election. There wasn't any budget in 2020. But even in that short space of time without oil, I guarantee if you'd asked those teachers, were they better, and students, were they better off within, between 2015 and 2020? They would tell you absolutely yes. And go ask the teachers. Well, you don't even have to ask them because you're seeing it by their own actions today, what is going on. So you don't even have, they're telling you by their actions in terms of the strike and working for a menial wage. You know, uh, this is less than slave labor, especially for a teacher that is preparing this country for the future. Every one of these, every one of these guys who govern this country, they had teachers. Without those teachers, they would not have been where they are today. That's the value. Teachers spend more time, I'm sure, in a lot of cases, than the parents spend with these teachers. They're the one that mold a nation. Where a kid, where could even turn in the wrong direction or turn in the right direction. And for the most part, teachers are the one who guide them and mold them. And by molding a single student, you're molding the nation. That's what teachers do, even more than the parents. That's the value of them. And you're telling me that you've got infrastructure for your friends and family because even in the quality of the infrastructure is not even of any quality. You're telling me that they're valued 58%, 58%, but teachers are valued 2%. It should be the reverse. They've got everything upside down. And like I said, this here is for the future because when oil is gone, we're gonna have to attract investors. And the number one criteria for attracting investors is a good education
education.
basis. That's a fact. That is a fact. And you ask that son, they're going to tell you the same thing. And you know what's the number two? Is not even infrastructure. You know what's number two, Dennis? Follow the rule of law. That is number two. Infrastructure coming number three. Follow the rule of law in number two. And you know what's the reason for follow the rule of law? Because it says if you follow the rule of law, that means you've got a disciplined workforce. People are going to come to work on time. They're going to follow processes, procedures. They're going to be consistent with what they're doing. And of course, they're not, they don't have to worry about crime and that type of stuff. So they've got everything turned on its head, and it's all because of greed and money. All they think about is money, infrastructure and giving their friends, filling their friends' pockets. That's why. That's why we're here. Why we. So I hope that people take this seriously because it is close to every single household, except for the rich, of course, because they could afford to pay for their kids. But for the most part of the population, they better take this seriously because it impacts their lives directly for themselves and their families. Because we all, you know, Dennis, we all have kids, and our highest priority is our kids' livelihood in terms, and the most important thing, it's like a religion to us, is to have a good education, and of course to stay healthy and to provide food. And we're not doing any of those now. You cannot do that with $5.50 a day that you're living on, while the hog and the money is going to that less, much less than 1% of the population. We've got an economy that's torn upside down.
Doc, before we are getting down to the close of this program, but I want to deal with a memorandum. And this is to show how education is in real crisis. Because a few programs ago, I allowed the public to better understand that the chief education officer and all the officers at central ministry have no sense of direction as it relates to how they send out pieces of correspondence to our teachers and the Department of Education across this country. And I pointed out what are the features of a memorandum. And here comes another memorandum dated the 4th of March 2024 from the Deputy Chief Education Officer, Examinations. In my whole life in the teaching profession, being a classroom teacher, being a principal, and I know that you would not want me to say Linden Technical Institute, but I was once the principal of trade school for
Oh,
eight
okay.
years.
Wow.
For 8 years. And I am very much grieved to know that education is really in crisis. Because while I serve as a regional education officer, any officer that would have sent anything to me from central ministry and it was incorrectly sent, I allow them to know that it is not properly done. And this is a chief education officer, sorry, deputy chief education officer. And here, what is the designation or the subject area? Examinations. And this gentleman cannot understand clearly what are the features of a memorandum. We know it is from to date and the subject, and you all you have to do is to sign your name at the bottom when you conclude that memorandum. This is what this gentleman did. Amir Ali, because it is here, it is in writing. I can't be afraid. This can't be libelous because this is going to be my evidence in court if they allow me to go there. Amir Ali, Deputy Chief Education Officer, Ministry of Education. And here this doc, the disrespect to Guyana Teachers Union. Here is where the union comes in. Every piece of correspondence that would have derived from the Ministry of Education, Central Ministry, must so allow the Guyana Teachers Union to benefit from a copy. They have denied for a very long time the Guyana Teachers Union from having copies of these pieces of correspondence. And this is the level of where we are at this time in education. And as we are discussing, we have started this discourse. I started it some 3 weeks ago, education in crisis. And we've added now the dialogue between GTU and the Ministry of Education. And so I'm of the opinion that since we are dealing with that there, the two questions I'm going to put very quickly to you would also have implications for our teachers. because you are the specialist in this area. So the first one is US $73.8 million in royalty not paid to Guyana. If you could just give us a heads up on that.
Well, it's there. There's some questions about it. Um, and the whole thing about the auditing, there are lots of questions about this money, and the major issue is that you come back to one of the crimes of this government. They're not transparent. So it's been a challenge to even get the right data. So we've got a lot of financial experts who would go find data, let's say from the World Bank report, and some would go find from Exxon report, and some would go find from a few from the government report. And a lot of times, they're not. There's confusion. So I've seen that. I think that came from Christopher Ram, and then of course you would get the rebuttal from the government. But you're not. All they've got to do is make the data transparent so that everybody can see it and we can do our analysis. But you're not sure which data you're analyzing from time to time, and it's a serious problem. It's the same thing not only with the money, but with the production. I focus a lot on the production, and they're hiding all of this data. It's a frustration. Look, I had to get after the vice president. I was in shock that the vice president even agreed with me. I don't know if you've seen the piece on his billboard that is so dishonest. They've got billboards all over the country saying that Guyana is getting 52%. Well, it's impossible. It's impossible. Guyana will never get 52%. And the vice president was defending it and coming up with nonsense in terms of how it's being calculated. So I had to barely say how ignorant he was. And then he finally came out last week in his press conference and confessed. He said that the one thing he would agree with Vincent Adams about is that he was right and I was wrong, meaning that he was wrong. And then he said that it shows that Exxon is misleading them, and it would appear that Exxon, if people see that, they would think that Exxon is running the country, which is what I've been saying. So it gets down to, Dennis, in terms of these numbers. It's the same thing with the audit. You remember the fiasco and the scandal with the $214 million that I and others have weighed in upon.
Yes.
Um, you know, and remember, an audit is just taking samples of thousands of data points. You don't do audit every single item. So if you're finding $214 million by just taking a sample, and then when you look at the kind of things that are in there that are being charged, I mean, what do you expect if you look at every single item? So that's what we're dealing with here. There's no transparency, and then the government is hiding. Even that audit with the 214, it was leaked. That audit was done. That audit was hired. The past administration hired a contractor to do that audit, and then it was leaked. That's the only way we learned about it, because it was leaked. So everything is being hidden. That is our problem. You got to go to court, and even when you go to court and ask them to show you the $2 billion for the liability coverage for the spill, when the court says to show it, and they're refusing to even show you proof of this $2 billion. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a dictatorship. They don't care what the judges say or anything of the sort, which is what happened here in this case with even with the students, whether the judge says so or not. It's a dictatorship. When Jack, do you remember the ruling in the insurance case? Jack said that the judges, he lambasted the judges, said that they had to expect decisions to be predictable, and they're getting into murky waters when they're going against the government. That's what Jack Dio said publicly to to have a chilling effect on the judiciary. He said it last week again. He went after the judges in the press conference. So that's
Yes,
what
I
we
heard that.
do, to intimidate the judges. But we're lucky that we've got a judge such as Sandil Kisoon. And I'm not saying this because he's ruling in favor of the litigants in these critical cases. But if you read his decision, it's well thought out. Very impressive. I am not being biased when I say it. Well thought out, very impressive. And he's got the courage to come out and rule in the direction of what is right. He should be a hero.
So that we are about to close, so I ask
Okay.
you in the few minutes remaining to give your closing remarks.
Well, this year is a crisis indeed as far as education, and I'm going to repeat again for all of Guyana: education and not infrastructure is the foundation for building an economy. So it's not just going to school, and it's an established fact, and that's what we use as building our economy. When I worked at the highest level of the U.S. government, and we're the ones who used to run the day-to-day operations of the government, the senior executive core of the government, and it was about education. And education is number one. Follow the rule of law is number two. Infrastructure is number three. So for us to be just putting 2% into education and 58% into infrastructure in Guyana, I mean, it's unbelievable. I know the teachers are worth probably that we underestimate, and we've been taking advantage of teachers for forever, it seems like. But we need, now that we can afford to pay them, we need to pay them what they are worth. And especially when our Caribbean neighbors, how could anybody explain to me that Guyana teachers are getting $850 a month, and the Grenada teachers are getting 1,900, two and a half times, close to two and a half times what we get, and they're not even producing a barrel of oil. Dominica is getting twice what our teachers are getting. St. Martin is getting $2,700 a month. How could we Trinidad is getting twice, $1,500 a month? How could we explain that? And then we're not dealing fairly with them. We in these negotiations, they cannot be trusted. The teachers are showing good faith, to stop, at least to suspend the strike, to go and have a negotiation, and then we know re- the rest of the story, that they're lying as to what was discussed, and now we're hearing a totally different. They say one thing and then change their minds and come out and say they cannot, and they can afford it. Like I said, they can afford it. All they've got to do is take 2% out of $14 billion out of the $666 billion that they're putting into the infrastructure and in their friends and families' pockets. $14 billion or 2%. Take it out of there, give the teachers that raise, and they will still be left with $652,000. That's the greediness that we're talking about.
So that I want to thank you very much for gracing us with your presence on this program. And I'm going to seek permission so that sometime the two of us would have the opportunity to continue this program. I have a lot of questions to ask you as it relates to the oil and gas industry, but that would be a separate program from the one we are discussing tonight: education in crisis, the dialogue between the Guyana Teachers Union and the Ministry of Education. And we can conclude in a very simple way that education is really in crisis. And I want to quickly show This is not any public advertisement, but it is a piece of correspondence from the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs on the subject trafficking in person awareness and sensitization sessions in secondary school. Let me just quickly point out to whoever is the permanent secretary. I'm not seeing the signature of the person and the name of the person clearly here, but whomever is that person, let me just say for that person that Aurora Secondary School is nowhere on any east bank of sea. And secondly, that the Escobar Technical Institute is nowhere on any east bank of any sea, or neither in any technical institute do we have forms 3, 4, and 5. And this is what our permanent secretaries are sending out, more particularly the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs. I'm not seeing the name properly printed here, but it is from the Ministry of Home Affairs. And so, ladies and gentlemen, viewers, I want to thank you very much for being with us in the studios and listening to us that education is in crisis and that you are part of the solution when that particular time would have come for you to make a decision to allow for something new to happen. Thank you very much. May God bless you and have a good night.